Welcome to the Theology of the Buddy, a podcast for Catholics who love the beauty of the Church's sacred tradition. This is episode 66. Wait, order 66?
Dun, dun, dun.
My name is Chris, and I'm joined by my theologically minded co-hosts, Mike and Brooke. If you're somebody who is looking to grow in their faith in new ways, looking to connect with other faithful Catholics who love the Lord and want to help you get closer to Him, or you're simply looking for other Catholic voices who will speak the truth without compromise, you've come to the right place. We're not experts, but we've learned a lot over the 15 plus years we've been best friends, and we want to share that with you. So if you haven't yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to ensure you get the best Catholic candid conversations delivered to you every week. While you're at it, don't forget to follow us on social media so you can keep up to date with all the great content we are sending out. Also, you can find all of our show notes and past episodes at theologythebuddy.com. All right, so on today's podcast, we are diving back into our Know Thyself series, where we talk about how self-knowledge will help you in your pursuit of a life of holiness and growing in virtue. So I'm really looking forward to it. Today, we are talking specifically about the 4 temperaments. But before we do that, how are my wonderful friends in Dorchester land?
I'm still just basking in the glow of being called theologically minded. That's so generous of you.
I am trying. I am trying to be theologically minded.
Good.
It's only taken me like 6 months to almost finish Confessions by Augustine. Does that count?
At least you're trying.
I'm trying so hard. I'm so dumb for that book.
English minor, right, Brooke?
To get through.
It is so difficult. And yes, English minor. I am proud of it.
I feel like a lot of people go into Confessions, and this is what I did, go in thinking, I want to read about the life of St. Augustine. And then you finish hearing about his life story and you're like, wait, there's still like 3/4 of a book left. And then he just starts talking about all these different deep theological concepts and stuff.
Yeah.
Discussions on time and memory and the concept of matter at the beginning of creation and before creation is just, is something. I love it, but I'm also like, you know that quote where Andy is just like, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing, but I'm really good at it. It's like, I'm not sure what I'm doing, and maybe I'll get it later sometime. Maybe I'll be good at it later. I just don't know what I'm doing.
This has been our official book review of Confessions. St. Augustine.
Who was the bishop? It wasn't Jerome, was it?
Ambrose.
Yeah. So thanks a lot to St. Ambrose for helping that whole process. And of course to St. Monica, you know, she's responsible for all the pain you've been going through these last 6 months. So make sure you tell her, you know, thanks a lot.
Your son's book was too hard to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a delight. It's been good. Tough,
Excellent.
but good.
Meanwhile, I'm just finishing Christus Vincit. Looking for more quotes to upset the girls with.
Oh my gosh. Speaking of which, can we backtrack a little? So, by the way, huge shout out to everybody who listened to the last podcast. Like, you almost doubled our numbers in terms of listens, you know, week over week. So thank you for doing that. We haven't heard from a whole lot, but we actually heard from a few people who were saying how much they loved it. So good job, ladies. Well done.
Yeah, it was a really good podcast. I thought you guys did a good job.
Did you listen to the whole thing? Oh, okay.
He shakes his head no. Yeah. But
Brooks just embarrassed me on the podcast as usual.
I was just curious to hear what you had to say.
But
Let's get to the end.
Okay.
I stopped a bit early, sorry.
But what was the quote from Christus Vincit that needed to be qualified, right? Or clarified?
Well, yeah, because I think it was a really strong image that kind of struck you,
Oh, it did.
but you lost some of the context of it.
Yes. And again, I said that I hadn't actually read it. So, like the book, I haven't read the whole book.
Yeah.
So, yes, please, Mike, clarify.
Yeah, I mean, he talks about NFP in that part. Primarily, he's talking about contraception. He mentions NFP in the context of NFP being abused, being used with a contraceptive mentality. And it's in that context that he mentions the idea that he thinks that at our judgment, we'll see children that God wished to create if we culpably, through our own selfishness, prevented him from being able to create these children that he wished to. So it's in the context of NFP, it's not saying don't use NFP, you're going to hell, sinner, blah, blah, blah. But I think it is highlighting the seriousness of discernment and how, yeah, if you're using NFP in your marriage, it's something you really have to think about.
Yeah.
And that's completely in line with the church's teaching on NFP, right?
Right. Yeah.
It is a powerful and emotional image, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
it's something that, like you said, it can feel like a gut punch, right? Like,
For a melancholic that struggles with depression and anxiety and a couple of other issues, it was like, I'm going to die.
yeah.
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 More on melancholy later.
But yeah, no, I mean, even Steve Skocek, I mean, who's kind of who's obviously a trad, loves the faith, loves traditional Catholicism. Even he, in his last podcast, was like, don't even start on NFP. Like, I'll punch you in the head. He understands that there are circumstances where it can be licit to use it. And I think, just from a personal perspective, which I unfortunately, Julie didn't say this in the podcast, but, like, the whole reason why our son John is alive today is because we started using and tracking with the Creighton model of NFP, of natural family planning. We had experienced miscarriage after miscarriage, and we were getting no help from anywhere else. And it was only when we started using the Creighton model and getting connected with a good, solid Catholic doctor that we actually found hope and were able to carry our baby almost to full term. I mean, he was born 5 weeks early. But I mean, without NFP, who knows? Right. Mm-hmm. And so we're grateful for it. I mean, it helped us to conceive and to keep baby in, so, just as a side note. So trads who want to trad shame people for using NFP, stuff it. Like, just stuff it.
And for our experience, like, we didn't have miscarriages and we didn't really have any issues conceiving. It was all postpartum and even during the pregnancy, I guess, like, I was diagnosed with low progesterone, which is, super important when you're pregnant. So I was able to keep track of that. And we also got in touch with a good doctor that made sure that I had progesterone, because I was only producing about 25 to 30% of what was normal before pregnancy. So we were able to get me on good, healthy progesterone to help us. Yeah. And then, after the baby and whatnot, I was able to get progesterone treatment for severe postpartum depression. Thanks, natural family planning.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it can be a marriage saver You know,
Mhm.
like I'm not going to lie, after dealing with the trauma of a miscarriage, especially at 19 weeks, and the absolute hormonal crash that happened with my
Mhm.
wife, like I never wanted to see that happen to her again. And I mean, it wasn't her fault, but I mean, like the mood swings, and just the difficulty that it created. I mean, it could kill a marriage. It almost did, to be honest. There were nights where I was going to bed like thinking, Lord, like you got to help us through this. I don't
Mhm.
know if we're going to make it. You know, so, you know, again, like you have to give credit where credit's due. And, you know, again, the trad shaming, it does no good on this. Especially if you're, you know, not using it with a quote unquote contraceptive mentality, you know, like just stuff it, guys who want to
I
shame
don't want a fancy
us.
car. I just don't want to die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I still stand by that. Although his imagery was kind of intense and maybe harsh,
Yeah.
he wasn't judging anyone individually.
Yeah, I agree.
think he was laying out
Yeah.
the legitimate warning that people need to reflect seriously on it, and not.
Mhm.
It wasn't meant to to judge people.
No.
So
No.
I do appreciate what he said, even though it was
harsh, but he's
kind of scary.
Yeah.
Mhm.
harsh, scary, but he's not wrong.
No.
It's just harsh,
No, exactly.
which sometimes we need to have harshness. It's
No.
okay.
No, true that. There is a median approach, I guess, you know, like, and I think that's possible.
And we've had a lot of median approaches and in lots of other things. And sometimes it's okay to just be firm.
Yep.
We need more firmness in our good leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe switching gears. So today on the podcast, we're getting into the discussion of the 4 temperaments. And before we do that, I kind of want to talk about why we're talking about this, especially given right now. Like right now in the church, everything is on fire. Thanks very much, Pope Francis, for just throwing some gas on the dumpster fire of 2020. You did a great job, you know, but like, if you listen to this past week's podcast today, you know, obviously we're recording before it even goes live, but if you listen to the past week's podcast with Coach Kramer Soderberg, he talks about how we should respond to the craziness that's going on right now in the world and the church. And his response was, you can't change what's happening in the world and, you know, the institution of the church. We can't. But what we can change and work on changing is ourselves, is responding wholeheartedly and generously to the call that God has given us through our baptism to become perfect as he is perfect. And I mean, that's a big deal, and that's a lifelong process, but it's possible. It's possible to become a saint, and we're called to be saints. So, you know, we could go on a comment rant, which if you're in our VIB group, you understand we've already done it over and over and over again, especially myself. I've lost my cool in that group a number of times this past week. But the real response at the end of the day is working on ourselves and becoming more and more the man or woman that God has called us to be, right?
Yeah, and that's the reason we started this whole series, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of when we were thinking about starting up the podcast again for this season. That was the thinking, right? We need to do something. We can't just be another podcast that's just reacting to bad news and being mad about it. We got to do something good.
Yeah.
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 And let's be honest, at a time where we're all at home anyway and on our own, we should all have time to reflect on, you know, the person that we see in the mirror and the person that we are inside.
Mm-hmm.
you know, get to know ourselves, like away from the busyness and distractions of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of that, how did we said that we would follow up on how our challenges went from the first Know Thyself podcast. So how'd it go?
It went pretty well at the beginning. It was a little challenging to refresh everyone's memory. We were doing daily examine and trying to add that to our daily prayer routine. So it did take me a few days to find a stable place for it because, just the routine of getting ready for bed and stuff, I didn't, have it in there. So I forgot it a few times, but it has actually made its way into actually being a routine to just, while getting ready for sleep, sitting down and doing the examine for a couple minutes. And I found following the outline on fish eaters was helpful for me. Just the basic point form method of it to keep it really simple. And yeah, one thing I found last weekend, we went to confession, and preparing for it was easier than it's ever been in the past. Because really, I was just like, well, I've been doing the examine, so I can easily think back to what things have I been thinking about every night that, it's kind of like that bigger examination of conscience flows much more easily. How did you find it, Brooke?
Doing the examine has been great. It's not hard to do. But you become more conscious of certain things as you reflect on the entire day. And I agree with Mike that going to confession and, examining your conscience before confession is a bit easier because, again, you've already thought about these things and you're ready to present them. So I also challenged myself to try and do 10 minutes of silence, which it was fine. I haven't done it every single day after that first week or so, because man, I am terrible at it. I am terrible at contemplative prayer, which only shows me that I should probably keep doing it. But yeah, at first it felt that those 10 minutes were really long, but then it didn't seem so long. And then I just found myself struggling to stay focused. But maybe I'll become more focused. I don't know.
Yep. Quit being effeminate and keep doing it, Brick.
Okay.
No, I mean, yeah, it can be tough. We all have that monkey brain, right? That, loves to go off and think about other things. But, even if we're distracted, lovingly, not harshly, but just, bring your mind back to God and just be like, okay, I'm sorry I took my mind off you, Lord, back on you and off the laundry list of whatever's going on in my life.
I'm just not sure what I'm supposed to do. Like, am I just supposed to not think of anything? Should I just talk to him? I have no idea.
There's lots of methods out there. I can make a great recommendation. There is a podcast episode on it. Yeah. But yeah, there's, Father David Nix has a podcast right now, Padre Peregrino, and he does great work. Actually, he has what he calls a VLX, and that's just dedicated to giving you topics of mental prayer and walks you through what to meditate on. So yeah, we'll put that in the show notes, but I'll send it to you as well in the VIB group. Yeah. On my side, I failed Hardcore. And I think part of the problem is that with a baby, with a 10-month-old baby, it's hard to find a routine. I'm able to squeeze in the things I've committed to with, mental prayer and the, like divine office and things like that. But yeah, just adding another little devotion like that can actually be really tough. And, so I did do it, but I didn't do it every day. And I definitely failed more than I succeeded. So, but nobody asked me how I was doing. Thanks a lot, listeners. So
pushing the blame onto somebody else.
Yeah, it's definitely their fault.
Yeah.
Definitely hear you on, like, even though it's only 2 minutes, sometimes it feels like hard, right? Like, because it's not in my routine, often I'd be like climbing halfway into bed and then I remember it and I'd be like, oh, I gotta get back out of bed and do it.
Yeah.
And for me, the hardest part is like, yeah, but I already talked about that. I already talked about that yesterday. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like I'm pathetic and a horrible person. And
well, why'd you do that sin again, Brooke?
I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, you guys get it.
No, it's tough, but you gotta keep pushing in. And, so I'm gonna try to get back up on the train and keep going with it. And, please ask me about it. You guys in particular, Strauss fam, ask me about it, because I'm woefully effeminate when it comes to, doing the right thing. So
I'll send you videos of Evie and Vincent just be like, Uncle Chris, you need to examine your conscience, you sinner.
Yes.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's great.
Cool. So let's hop into it now that we've spent about 25 minutes talking about other things. So, we want to talk about, in particular, the 4 temperaments. Why get into this? So today, in particular, many people have become nearly obsessed with personality tests. Every job that I've done, they've encouraged us to do the Myers-Briggs. Right now, especially in Christian circles, like evangelical circles, but even creeping into Catholic circles, which I have an issue with, and maybe we can do a podcast on this later, is the Enneagram. So everybody's getting obsessed with these personality tests. However, traditionally, there's really only been 4 temperaments that people generally fell into, that it was understood that people fell into. In my research, I read a bunch of different articles, but I found that Wikipedia kind of summed it up well. It says, quote, "The 4 temperament theory is a proto-psychological theory which suggests that there are 4 fundamental personality types: sanguine, choleric, melancholic, and phlegmatic. Most formulations include the possibility of mixtures among the types where an individual's personality types overlap and they share 2 or more temperaments. Greek physician Hippocrates described the 4 temperaments as part of the ancient medical concept of humorism, that 4 bodily fluids affect human personality traits and behaviors. Modern medical science does not define a fixed relationship between internal secretions and personality, although some psychological personality type systems use categories similar to the Greek temperaments." So, yeah, like I said, in the history of the world, ever since ancient Greece, they've been using these 4 personality types. It's in the writings of the saints. You can see it all the way through there. They make mention of, I was just even reading from Saint Therese of Lisieux, and I mean, she's only, she only died in the late 1800s, but even she makes reference to the melancholy personality. And, it's only been since recent times, Carl Jung and Freud and like modern psychology and psychiatry, that these personality tests have kind of grown. So according to storepoint.org, it notes that there is a difference, however, between temperament and personality. Temperament is your innate wiring from God, what you're naturally predisposed to, like your eye color or fingerprint. It's unchangeable. It's why some people are drawn to the spotlight and the stage, and others are content with a cubicle in a quiet office. You don't choose who you are, and you can't change how you're wired, although many of us try. Personality is how you display your thoughts and feelings. It's influenced by things like birth order, education, experiences. It can and does evolve over time. Just think about the high school version of you compared to the man or woman you are today. The years and experiences in between have changed you. Your temperament is the why behind your personality, end quote. So, I don't know about you guys, but I think personality tests are fun. They're a lot of fun. In my experience, I find them to be inaccurate. I can do 3 different Myers-Briggs tests from different websites, and they all come out with different results. Temperaments, however, are far more broad and generally don't change, and they're generally pretty accurate. So, yeah, continue on. So in the interior life, it is important to know one's temperament because it is in knowing how we are wired that we can better approach the ways that we can attempt to grow in virtue. The truly magnanimous person, for example, someone like our Lord, would have had the positive aspects of all 4 temperaments held in perfect balance without any of the negative aspects. So while in our fallen nature, one temperament generally predominates and a secondary temperament kind of sits shotgun, the end goal is to not be subject to the temperament, but to hold them in subjection to our will and intellect. But we can't do that unless we really know what the 4 temperaments are. So do you guys want to talk quickly about the 4 temperaments? Or did you have additional thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to fight storepoint.org and tell them Father Ripperger disagrees.
With what in particular?
The unchangeableness of temperaments. I think it's more of a matter of their terminology, though.
Okay.
Because I think Father Ripperger is using temperaments just to mean the categories. And he talks about how you can change which temperaments apply to you, and they will change as you grow in virtue. And what's the name of the podcast lady?
Julia Monin.
Yeah, Julia Monin said the same thing, that if you grow in virtue, the way that the 4 temperaments manifest in your personality will change as you approach being more Christ-like, and you start to manifest the virtues of other temperaments and less of the vices associated with your primary temperament.
Right.
Or you go the other way, the opposite, right? Become more vicious, etc.
Yeah. I don't think the storepoint.org is not saying that you are forever stuck in a temperament, but I think it, for us, we understand that, say you are, who you are is more melancholic, but you have grown so much in virtue that you are exuding those other personalities. If you were to become lax in the work of virtue, you would probably lapse back, in my opinion, probably to your predominant temperament. Would you not think that? Yeah,
maybe. And that partly depends on how deeply and how long you've been practicing those virtues.
Yeah.
Father Ripperger talks about how basically the brain will over time change and adapt. And the way he expressed it is, it seems like these changes can be long-term or permanent. But anyway, I'll let Brooke explain what the temperaments are. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just interrupting and taking forever.
Yeah. But just maybe as a side note, before you start, Brooke, I read this really good quote from the book, The Temperament God Gave You by Art and Lorraine Bennett. It's from Father Conrad Hawk. And he says that, quote, "Every temperament is in itself good, and with each one, man can do good and work out his salvation," end quote. So, really innately, these temperaments can be good. So before we get into them, don't start like comparing them and saying, well, this one is better than this one, like, I'm not saying you would, but like for our listeners, it's easy to kind of say, well, this one, because of the potential faults that are associated, can be worse than another. But I don't think that necessarily is the case. So anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
All right, hop into it, Brooke. Let's do this.
Okay, so I listened to a podcast by Julia Monin, and I also listened to Father Ripperger as well, both talk about the temperaments. I quite liked Julia Monin's explanation, as it was easier for me to follow. And the way that she described temperaments was how we initially react to something, or basically how we react to our environment, how we react to things that are presented to us. And so there's 4 temperaments. And should I just get into briefly describing them? Both of the men are nodding their head, rolling their eyes. I think I just killed Mike. So there's choleric, there's melancholic, phlegmatic, and sanguine. And to briefly summarize each of them, choleric would be, as Julia Monin describes, the rabbit from Winnie the Pooh. Someone that likes order and to be in control, to have power, strong-willed, determined, all that kind of stuff. Phlegmatic would be Piglet, the peacemaker, will do whatever anybody tells them to do, doesn't like conflict. Then there is the sanguine, which she attributes to Tigger, loves people, super energetic, wants to have fun all the time. And then there's the melancholic, which I relate to. That's Eeyore. And, he likes to think a lot, kind of a pushover, kind of very perfectionist, a bit of a pessimistic person. Look, I'm doing it right now. I'm literally just making it terrible. I think we'll attach the episode in the show notes so people can listen to that. I don't think we need to get too deep into the descriptions, do we?
Well, I mean, maybe we can kind of talk about the way that we have experienced it in our own lives, and maybe that's kind of how we can parse it out. So yeah, Mike, what were you going to say?
Maybe predominant faults and stuff too. Like, that was the most important thing that struck me from Father Ripper's talk, was for each of the 4 temperaments, there are most commonly predominant faults that go with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that can be important in knowing yourself.
Yeah. So one of the fun things that we decided to do is we decided to take personality tests or temperament tests to find out what our personality or what our temperament was, I should say, and then share it with one another. And we're gonna do that again with you guys, and kind of share a little bit of our reactions to this from one another, because it's some things are super surprising. And so like maybe we'll start with Mike. When Mike did the personality test, all of us called phlegmatic. Like, we just were like, this is Mike. Mike is a guy who doesn't want to get into arguments. He's a bit of an idealist. He fits in anywhere, like anywhere we go, anywhere I've been with Mike has been the guy that everybody can get along with, doesn't have an issue with. They're just like, this cool guy over here, he's cool.
Father Ripperger say like they're kind of like unremarkable or something.
Inert. Is the
Inert.
word he used when talking about the faults of phlegmatic people.
Yeah.
They tend to just sometimes just sit there and not do stuff.
Yeah, and they like it when people make decisions for them.
Yeah, and that's true, honestly. Like, I definitely have that trait. Like, I would rather not be the leader when I'm doing something. I'd rather have someone make the tough decision and then me have to just be like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do that.
Even if it's not a good idea?
Yeah, that's the temptation, right?
Yeah.
That's
complacency.
That's the fault that goes with it, is like the temptation is just to go with the flow, even if it's not right, to just let things be. And that's the temptation in like growing in the spiritual life too. Like Father Ripperger said about phlegmatics, that what did he say? They're like the least likely to become saints.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Oof.
Because they tend not to make the effort to grow in holiness. They tend to just be lazy and float through life and not root out their vices.
I think you're doing a great job.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I'm wrong though.
In my experience of you though, I mean, I would certainly say that you have a lot of the positive aspects of phlegmaticism, if that's a word. But, I see at times when you have like definitely done the non-phlegmatic thing where I would almost have thought you were choleric in a personality, choleric being a little bit more stubborn, a little bit more hot-headed, a little bit more opinionated. And, how often have we gotten in arguments, you and I, and you're just like, no, Chris, that's stupid. Shut up. I mean, you know it. You know that we've had those kinds of conversations. But
the others, like, they're not absolute, obviously. Like, everyone's to some extent a mix. But one thing that's super phlegmatic about my reaction, even in that situation, is if I have to say, Chris, that's wrong, it makes me deeply uncomfortable. I hate that. It takes so much effort for me to actually argue with someone and be like, no, you're wrong.
You make it look so easy, Mike.
You can see on his face when he's trying to think of a response and it takes a little while.
Yeah.
He does it all the time on Twitter.
You see his face on Twitter? Wow.
Well, no.
That's a new
feature. I see him when he's looking at his phone, responding to someone. He's just like, I'm like, what are you doing? Somebody's wrong.
Yeah, it's so awkward because...
But it's awkward for me, too, watching him try and... just like, I can't help you.
Yeah. So...
Anyway.
I get in the state where I feel like responsibility to say something, but I also hate arguing with people. So
yeah. But yeah, I mean, I would say if anything, your phlegmatic and maybe your shotgun, your BRs on the pit guy is choleric. Would you agree with that, Brooke? Would you say that about Mike?
The shotgun? Yes and no. I mean, if I'm looking at the description of a choleric,
not really. Which one would you pick for me?
See, you're really likable. So part of you is sanguine. You know what I mean? I feel like more people would think that you're a sanguine over a choleric, but that's like not even like shotgun. That's like sitting in the back seat. Like, he's just kind of like, hey, I'm back here.
Yeah, that's another thing. Some people have two types that are almost equal.
Yeah.
For me, I'm like very, very phlegmatic, and the other three are almost zero. Yeah, so the other three are really well balanced. One was actually sanguine, but it's really close with the other two. So it's probably not super indicative.
Yeah.
I don't know if you did this with Julie, by the way, but Brooke and I actually also took this test for each other.
Oh, yes.
I answered it as if I was Brooke, and she did the same thing.
Yes. I remember that. Yeah.
Talk about that if we have time. But anyway, go ahead, Brooke.
Oh, you want me to talk about myself?
Yeah.
So when I took the test, not surprising, I ended up being more melancholic than anything else. And choleric was actually last place. My shotgun is also sanguine, which surprised me because I totally think I'm more choleric over sanguine. And I have reasons for that. So
I thought you were more phlegmatic, but let's hear your reasons first.
why I thought I would be choleric.
Yeah.
Okay. So cholerics like to do work. You know, they'll just work and get things done. And that's what they like to do. And it's got to be my way or the highway. Even though I don't think that I'm a natural born leader by any means. I don't like to be a leader. I like to help, but I don't like to be a leader. But my thing is when I'm stressed, I like to do work as a distraction. Like Mike knows if I get stressed or depressed or anxious or angry, I will just clean things or make stuff or give myself some kind of project to just distract myself from whatever problem I'm having. And that's kind of why I thought I would be a bit more choleric. But yeah, apparently he thinks I'm more sanguine or phlegmatic.
Phlegmatic. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't like conflict, which is also true.
Yeah. You really like to please everyone.
Yeah.
And follow the rules and do whatever people ask of you and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Can sometimes be a bit of a pushover, right?
Yes.
And those are kind of phlegmatic things.
Yeah. So I was surprised that I got choleric as the second. I was not surprised to see melancholic.
Sanguine. You got sanguine.
Oh, sanguine. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was not surprised to see melancholic. It made perfect sense.
See, to me, I would definitely have said melancholic and then shotgun is sanguine. Because if anybody knows you, you are just one of the funniest people that I know, period. End of
really know
statement.
me to know that.
Yeah, but like, I mean, once you're comfortable with people though, like, and they start to know who you are, like you're just like no holds barred. You just want to make people laugh, which
I love
mean,
making people laugh.
and it's something you're good at. Mike laughs at my jokes maybe 30% of the time. 95% of your jokes, Mike's giggling at. Like, it is, you have a gift. You have a gift. And I would have said definitely that you were a sanguine minor.
Yeah. But
that's insightful, I think. Yeah.
Well, I'm not an open book. So it's like, I think I'm friendly with everybody, but I don't like to be vulnerable with everybody. Or I feel, well, there's nothing really to lose in a certain situation, or I'm really comfortable, then I can really just, the pajamas are on and the Mrs. Wart pictures are coming out. That's just it. Only my real friends know that.
And all the podcast listeners now.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that does sound like the perfect description of a sanguine melancholic, right?
Mm-hmm.
You only let the sanguine out with your few close friends.
Yeah.
And to everyone else, you let the melancholic side show more.
Well, because
right?
I'm reserved and I'm an introvert. So it's like, I like small, tiny tea parties, not really big groups. They stress me out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
So what did you guys think my personality would be?
Sanguine. 100% sanguine, none of the other ones.
No, well, I wouldn't be.
Maybe melancholic only when listening to emo music.
Melancholic only when listening to the last Best Me Without You album and realizing things changed later.
The new album's not that bad, for the record. But so
I would say sanguine first and then choleric second.
So here it is, friends. So I am definitely more melancholic. My predominant personality, according to this test, is melancholic. Sanguine is right underneath. Then choleric, then phlegmatic. When I was doing the test with Julie, kind of looping back to what Mike was asking about, I was walking her through. We were kind of doing it side by side, and we were going through the questions and read the questions. And I would say, "What would you say about me, Julie?" And she would say, "Oh, like, gets angry easily. Disagree." And I would be like, "Strongly agree." And she would be like, "What?" So, yeah, it's one of those things where I can tell you right now, like I'm reading the definition of melancholic on this website, which we'll put in our show notes at theologyofthebuddy.com. And you can do the test yourself at home and have fun. Do it with your spouse. It could be a really fun date night thing. So it says here, the melancholic temperament is fundamentally introverted and thoughtful. Melancholic people often were perceived as very or overly pondering and considerate, getting rather worried when they could not be on time for events. That's a joke for me. I'm never on time.
Yeah, for you.
Melancholics can be highly creative in activities such as poetry and art. See the band Kensei and Truth Left Standing, and what's the other band name? After Exile.
After Exile, yeah.
And can become preoccupied with the tragedy and cruelty in the world. This is why I told my mom, stop talking to me about conspiracy theories and giving me the news brief of everything that's on fire, because I can't handle it. Yep. Often they are perfectionists, self-reliant and independent, #only child. One negative part of being a melancholic is that they can get so involved in what they are doing, they forget to think of others. That is 110% true. 110% true for me. Sometimes when I get in my own head, dude, like, family be damned, as Kennedy Hall would say. Like, I am just, it's not good for a marriage to be like that. So you really have to fight it. You really have to fight it.
Now, again, these are all in extremes, right? So like some of these definitions are in extremes because that's how we understand things a little bit better, and they better illustrate, the overall personality and help us relate to things a little bit better too.
Right.
Yeah. It's an abstraction. Obviously, the 4 temperaments were not, passed down from God in the scriptures or anything like that. They're a human creation that attempts to describe our personality. Mm-hmm. So you can't say that they're 100% perfect, but they've kind of proven the test of time, unlike a lot of modern methods. Mm-hmm. So I tend to think they're a useful way of describing things.
Yeah. Like, for example, Chris was saying that it was a joke about being on time. I think we all know here that sometimes penny time is a little bit slower. Often you guys are a little bit later. Mm-hmm. I'm trying not to be mean. But Chris knows it. He's like,
just burning everyone.
I'm so sorry. Episode. But me, I need to be on time. My bag will be packed like weeks before I go on a trip because I need to know that I'll be exactly where I said I would be at a very specific time. And I time everything out very, very well. And Mike knows this. I freak out if I think I'm going to be late. And I'm just praying the whole time I'm going somewhere. I don't want to be late. Please get me on time.
But part of that is that because you're afraid of disappointing the person on the other end waiting for you.
Yes, I am.
You know?
It's kind of ghost types working together there.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things where like the personality of your spouse can be in conflict with yours. When like my family will be like, oh, come by like 2-ish. In Brooke's brain, that is, you be here by 2:00 or we're not speaking to you ever again. And in my brain, it's like, if you show up sometime between noon and 4, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I'm just being all phlegmatic, like, yeah, we get ready whenever. And Brooke's having a panic attack because I'm not like ready to go yet.
But and here's my personality take. You say be here by 2-ish, and I say, crap, I can't be there till 3. But you want to know what? If they don't like it, they can deal with it, because you know what? They love me, and if they don't love me, well, you know, whatever. Like, screw them. I don't know.
Impose a time on me. How dare they impose a time on me and tell me to be here?
Yeah,
if
they can't love me because I'm late, then they've never really loved me at all. That's the mentality, you know. So yeah, and that's the choleric and the melancholic going hand in hand. That's the independent. Yeah. Like, I want my own way, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know. I'm angry about it. I don't know.
Yeah, cholerics are more likely to get angry.
Yeah,
and stay angry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, the worst part about being a melancholic, speaking of like long lasting emotions, is if you hurt someone that's a melancholic, or they experience some kind of trauma, or I don't know, big or small, we remember it like super clearly.
Yep.
We just can't just forget about it. You just can't forget about it. How, you know, there I go again. Like, you know, you just can't. It's stuck with you. So like, you know, you get, I don't know, heartbroken by somebody several years ago. Like, you know, you lose a best friend or something. You still think about it. And, you know, those feelings just don't heal up because, you know, you dwell on them, which is a horrible, horrible weakness of the melancholic, is we dwell on things for a really long time. Yeah.
The weird thing that I think Mike could probably attest to as well is like what you're describing. That's me. So the fact that like the fact that you think I'm more sanguine kind of blows my mind, because he knows in particular that like when I've been hurt, like, or gone through a trauma, it takes years sometimes to heal and to move on. So yeah. So that's, and maybe we can kind of divert here really quick. So with this idea of the temperament, there are faults, or predominant faults that are associated with them. You know, one of the faults that is associated with melancholy is despair, is the sin of acedia, or the vice of acedia, right? Or a spiritual sadness, that, you know, some people just call it laziness, but acedia in its true form is a form of spiritual sadness. It's a form of despair, despairing in God's goodness, and essentially a turning inward and just going about it all on your own.
Yeah. Woe is me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that's one of the things that I've had to fight through a lot. Like, do we have a list of some faults that are associated with each of the temperaments?
Yeah. Yep. So, for example, this is going off of Julia Monen's description. Some of the faults of the choleric would be impatient, domineering, bossy, insensitive, unwilling to delegate, and get depressed when life is out of control and people don't want to do things their way. If we're looking at the phlegmatic, I'm looking at Mike. The key weaknesses would be lack of decisiveness and enthusiasm, procrastinator, and gets depressed when life is full of conflict.
Why are you laughing?
I was wondering the same thing.
Because there's a shed outside that's taken like 3 months to finish. I'm so
Because
sorry.
Brooke keeps procrastinating.
Yeah, she should get that shed done. Wow.
Brooke.
Take
It's
forever.
just too funny. The shed is literally outside this window, like, hello, I'm not done yet.
And it's going to take about 6 years for Brooke to forgive me for taking so long to finish the shed.
I am hurt.
Butt hurt.
Okay, so for the sanguine, their key weaknesses are restless, disorganized, not good with money, can't remember details, and they get depressed when life is no fun and no one seems to love them. And Julia was saying they get sad when people don't think they're cute.
Yeah.
Like your daughter.
If you were to ask someone if you're cute and they say you're silly instead.
Yeah. I'm a little burned about that, actually. Probably going to hold on to that one for another 6 months. For the record, just because everybody needs to hear this. So after Mass today, by the way, Happy Feast of Christ the King, in the past, for those who are listening. But after the Mass today, we're outside and we're hanging out with Evangeline, Brooks and Mike's daughter. And we have our baby John with us, and she's talking about how cute baby John is. And I said to Evangeline, basically, that if people think that baby John is cute and they also think baby John looks like me, what does that make me? And Evangeline said, silly. I'm so burned. I'm so burned about it. Again,
Sorry.
It's like
Cute.
It's like every girl in high school. It's just like every girl in high school, just breaking my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Too funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so
continuing on.
The key weaknesses of a melancholic are easily depressed, too focused on details, remembers the negative, and they get depressed when life is out of order, standards aren't met, and no one seems to care.
Brooke's just like, oof, all of those were like daggers in the heart.
I hate it because, again, I have to like be vulnerable and be like, this is what hurts me.
Yeah.
I think the sanguine flies out when it's like, it's almost like a defense, like, look how happy I am. But inside I'm screaming.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Inside. But whatever.
But again, I would say that there are some positive aspects, right? I mean, we're kind of focusing on some of the negative as well. But I mean, for a melancholic, being predisposed to reflection and things like that, that's a good. And our Lord had that.
Yeah.
Our Lord had that kind of personality where he would go away and pray. He would and be okay with being alone with the Father and in the desert for 40 days. No big deal.
Melancholics are able to like retreat into their mind and think, because that's what we do. We live in our heads. When Julia was saying that people who are melancholics are often artists and, stuff like that, I was like, yeah, because we think a lot and we contemplate things very, very differently and we feel emotions very, very intensely. So we're able to use our creative side to, I don't know, illustrate that in whatever medium you want to use, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, Mike, again, probably can attest to this. When I would do the majority of my writing of music was in probably my darkest period of life. That was when when my creativity took off. you know, and it came out, you know,
Yeah.
so.
So maybe the opposite way of thinking about these temperaments is, since we've gone through the predominant faults, you can think about it like when you're trying to grow in virtue. I almost want to learn how to think like a melancholic, or like be a bit of a melancholic in mental prayer. And the same with the other virtues of 4 temperaments, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you want to become a saint, you gotta act like all 4 of these in some sense, right?
But yeah, everything has to be tempered, right? Everything has to be subject to the will. And when someone is perfectly tempered, you know, with these temperaments, then they're able to demonstrate all of those virtuous sides of those temperaments, you know, very, very well. And they've mastered those virtues.
Okay, all the good things about phlegmatics. I'm ready.
I'm just teasing. So their key strengths are balance, even disposition, dry sense of humor, which is great, and a pleasing personality. I love how that's a strength, dry sense of humor. Because it's almost like it's inoffensive humor. No one can be offended by it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like dad jokes? Is that my personality type?
Yeah.
Oh, Julie would say, no, those hurt me.
Oh my gosh. Julie hates dad jokes. It's weird. It's weird. But yeah, you know, again, talking about that need of going against our own personality types or temperaments in terms of our faults and trying to grow in those other ways. You know, if we're trying to be saints, this is what we've got to do. And even when it's difficult, even when we're going through difficult times, we have to kind of, again, hold our emotions subject to our intellect and our will. I was reading from just an absolute gem of a book called The Context of Holiness. And I think I've talked about it before on the show, but it's talking about essentially the behind the scenes stuff that was going on in Therese's life and personality, from like a psychological perspective. That's Saint Therese of Lisieux. In the last year of her life. So this is when the suffering was going through the roof for her. She was, you know, dealing with tuberculosis. Things were not good for Therese. In the last year of her life, she made the choice to work with a woman by the name of Sister Marie of St. Joseph. Can I quickly read this to you? Maybe we can kind of end off with this, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
Yeah. Am I jumping the gun at all?
That sounds good to me, because we've got a long podcast on our hands already.
Yeah. So Sister Marie, this is from The Context of Holiness. And the author, not sure of his name. Again, I'll put it in the show notes. He says, quote, Sister Marie of St. Joseph was subject to severe mood swings. One moment she would be overly exuberant, and in the next moment she would be in the depths of depression. Today she would probably be diagnosed as being bipolar or manic depressive. She was also subject to fits of violent outbursts of anger. Because of her unstable and volatile personality, all of the nuns kept their distance. In consequence, Sister Marie lived on the fringes of the community. She worked alone in the linen room because no one was willing to work with her. Over time, she became a very lonely and isolated human being. But there was a ray of hope for Sister Marie. Her name was Therese. Now, just as a side note, moving from this quote, Saint Therese was woefully melancholic, and she was given to bouts of depression and all of that, and liked to be on her own. As a kid, she walked the schoolyard alone, and all of the kids thought she was weird. It was she was a melancholic. So he goes on to say, quote, Sister Marie went to the prioress and asked permission to receive guidance from Therese, because she perceived in Therese both an understanding heart and a non-judgmental mind. The secret griefs of Sister Marie became known to Therese, griefs with which Therese could identify. Like Therese, Sister Marie had lost her mother at a young age and knew the pain of being an outsider. Therese's own pain gave her the eyes to see Sister Marie in a way that no one else could. Quote, if you knew her well as I do, Therese said to Pauline, you would see that she is not responsible for all the things that seem so awful to us. Again, there's always going to be opportunities for us to grow in that realm of virtue, and to go against our own wants and desires and kind of predispositions. Another quick side note about Therese, right? Therese loved her family. Therese was so well connected to her family that when Pauline left and joined the convent, it threw her into a deep depression. And yet, with all that in mind, when Therese went and joined that same convent, at times of recreation, Pauline testified, she, quote, never went out of her way to meet her own 3 blood sisters. She chatted with any nun, no matter who she was, and especially with anyone she felt was lonely or left out, going against that melancholic personality, right? So, maybe this week, maybe a challenge for ourselves and our listeners, take this little temperaments test and ask the question, how can I take aim at my predominant faults and seek to go against them and go and try to grow in those other positive aspects of the other temperaments.
Mm-hmm.
Good idea.
Do you guys have any other final thoughts?
No, I think that's great. Chris, what are you going to do? You and I are both melancholics, so we might be able to help each other out.
That's a good question. I think, honestly, you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually, instead of spending my time griping about the church, I am, because I do that way too friggin' much, and thinking about it and obsessing about what's happening and what's going on, I'm going to look for ways to serve Julie better this week. So,
your domestic church.
Pardon?
Your domestic church.
Yeah.
Like your home, your domestic church.
Yeah. So look for maybe plan a date and take Julie on a date, and look for ways specifically that she would feel loved. Get out of my own head and think about what kind of date would I really love, and really think about what would she love. Because Julie, being the kind of personality that she is, she just kind of goes, I'll do whatever, so
yeah,
it's okay. He'll eat whatever. But
I don't know what you want.
But yeah, so I think that's what I'm gonna do. What are you gonna do, Brooke?
Ugh, I don't know.
You did this to yourself, Brooke. You didn't have to ask.
I did do it to myself. Maybe, I don't know. I need someone to tell me what to do.
What, are you phlegmatic or something?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to think about it. But when I think about it, I will say something.
Maybe we'll take suggestions from the Vibs.
I'll take it. I'll take that. Yeah, because here's the thing. Melancholics have a hard time making snap decisions. We like to think things over and be very calculated. because then you're less likely to get hurt or fail. Yeah.
And we phlegmatics just don't like to make decisions at all.
Do you see my pain? We complete each other. Anyway, there you have it.
Just a last quote talking about, do you see what we have to deal with? For those of us who are married in our domestic church, God has intentionally put us with our spouses, just like he puts, put Therese in the same convent as Sister Marie to perfect us. St. John of the Cross writes, "You should understand that those who are in the monastery are craftsmen, placed there by God to mortify you by working and chiseling at you, so you become worthy of heaven." And so, just remember your spouse, in your little domestic church, they're that craftsman that God has put there. So maybe ask your spouse what you need to work on this week. Maybe that's more of the idea. Maybe we can ask them too what we need to work on.
I got a gleam of power in his eyes. Scared me.
Not at all.
All right. Well,
this is going to hurt me.
All right, guys. Well, thank you again very much to everyone for listening to this bit of a longer podcast, but I don't know. I've received a lot of value from this conversation, and it's inspired me to really pursue virtue more. So hopefully you're finding that yourselves, and our listeners are finding that as well. Hit us up on social media. Let us know what you think. You can find us at Theology of the Buddy. You can email us at theologyofthebuddy@gmail.com. Make sure you visit our website, theologyofthebuddy.com, for all of our past episodes and show notes. And we'll see you next week. And until then,
stay truddy.